Hi, welcome to today's presentation on our Primavera P6. This is going to be our lesson 2. So, if you missed the very first lesson, which is in lesson 1, remember some of the things we discussed about in lesson 1 included we went through major definitions of in project management. Not just talking about major definitions in project management, we also looked at key terms that we use in Primavera P6. Terms like what we refer to as the EPS, and we said that EPS simply means enterprise project structure. Then we also talked about the OBS. OBS simply means organizational breakdown structure. Then aside from that, we also talked about the WBS. WBS simply means the work breakdown structure. And then we looked at the definition for project. And we said that project is a temporary endeavor that has a beginning and end and then produces unique result. Then we also talked about program, and we said that program simply means or refers to a group of related projects. And remember, in that very lesson we said that program is synonymous to what we refer to as enterprise project structure in Primavera P6. Then and we also talked about portfolio, and we said that the portfolio is a combination of projects as well as programs make up what we now refer to as a portfolio. Okay, so in this very lesson, we're going to be looking at some very interesting topics, especially with respect to how to use the Primavera P6 software. So part of the things we're going to be discussing would be, first, we shall do a quick tour. We shall do a quick tour on Primavera P6. In other words, understanding what each of those buttons and menu that we have in Primavera P6 represent. Then also we shall learn how to set up preferences. When we talk about preferences, preferences simply means setting up our Primavera P6 to enable us use it, or rather to be able to determine the default values or the units that we're going to be using in the course of our scheduling. And then also we shall be learning how to set up what we now refer to as our enterprise project structure, if time permits. And then, of course, we'll also learn how to be able to create a new project. And subsequently, we shall also talk about how to create a work breakdown structure. So these are some of the things we shall be taking a look at in this very lesson. It promises to be a very exciting one, and then of course I can't wait to dive in. Once again, you are welcome. Alright, so if you want to sign in into your Primavera P6, this is the interface you're presented with. So this is the part where you put your username, and then of course in the next cell, that's where you input your password. So you just type in the password for your Primavera P6 and then you click on OK. So when you click on OK, the Primavera would eventually load, and sometimes you may get a message that says appropriate industry for your organization has not been selected in admin preferences. Please contact administrator. So it's nothing to worry about. Just click on OK, and it might take split seconds for your Primavera P6 to load. Okay, so it comes up in this particular manner. So what you're looking at here is what we now refer to as the project interface. Remember, one key thing about Primavera is the fact that whatever page you are, you would usually notice a description of that page boldly written at the top, just like we can see from this view. And if you take a look at what we're currently looking at, notice that our screen is divided into 3 major aspects. So these are the 3 major aspects that the screen is divided into. So you have, let's say, the first part, which is, I'm going to refer to this as the first part of the screen. Then this is the second part, and this is the third part. So these are the 3 main aspects that you have in Primavera P6. So this part of your screen, we're going to be referring to it as what we call your timeline. And then for the second part of your screen, this represents your Gantt. This represents your Gantt. And the third part of your screen is what we now refer to as your detail view. So in essence, the three major components or the three major views that you have in the project view, remember we're still on the project view in our Primavera P6, are the timeline view, the Gantt view, and then the detail view. So just like the name suggests, what the detail view does is that it gives us detail on any item that we select in the timeline. That's what the detail view does. Aside from that, the Gantt view uses bars to represent either project duration or activity duration depending on what page we're looking at. And that's essentially what the Gantt does. But don't forget that beyond this, the Gantt view can also be used for other things. For example, it can be used to show relationships that exist between your project activities. That is also another thing that the Gantt can help us to illustrate. Aside from showing the relationship that exists between our project activities, your Gantt can also be descriptive. In other words, possibly contain the name of the project or the activity, and then also the start, end date, and some other features or some other things you may want to clearly illustrate in your Gantt. So these are some of the things we're going to be looking at. So I want to be able to display the Gantt for the set of projects or default projects that I already have in my Primavera P6. Alright, so to do that, it's pretty straightforward. Just double click in your Gantt. So once you double click in your Gantt, you're going to see the Gantt chart. So you notice all of these bars. All of these bars represent projects and their durations. And for example, if we select a project here, let's say this very project, that's the city center office building. So you notice this is the Gantt. It might not be it might look so long here, but we can actually compress it by using the zoom button to be able to have a much more better view. If you notice, if I hover my mouse on the dates that I have on top of my Gantt view, it changes to a magnifying lens. So once that happens, you can simply click and then drag. So when you click and drag, what I'm doing now is I am compressing the view. That's essentially what's happening. If I drag to the right, I'm expanding, the view of my Gantt. But if I drag to the left, I am compressing the view of my Gantt. The reason why I'm doing this is for us to see if we can notice the beginning of a particular project for a given Gantt chart, and then also where that particular project ends. So let's still compress a little bit to see. Okay, great. So this is exactly what I am looking for. So you notice that for project 1, which is the city center of this building, if you look at the Gantt clearly illustrates the start date of this project as well as the end date of this project. Then also other sample projects that we have too, you notice that their start date and end dates are clearly illustrated and then a lot more conspicuous here. So the Gantt chart, like I explained to you earlier on, uses bars to represent project duration and then also give us some other descriptions like the start date, end date. And don't forget, you are actually at liberty to include some other features or some other title that you want displayed in your Gantt. Don't forget, there's also a zoom slider here, just in the event you're not very comfortable using the click and drag portion that we used earlier. So you can simply go to this tools bar and then click on the zoom to expand, that is the zoom in to expand, or you click on the zoom out to compress, depending on exactly what you're looking at. So remember, we said earlier on that our Primavera P6 is divided into 3 major portions, and the 3 major portions are: you have the portion 1, which is the timeline view, you have the second part, which is your Gantt view, and then you have the third part, which is your detail view. Okay, however, there are also other aspects of Primavera P6 which we are going to be talking about. So the other aspects we're going to be talking about would include, if you notice at the left hand portion of your Primavera P6, which is this very portion, you notice that there are some buttons there that you have in your Primavera P6. Okay, so in essence, the left hand portion of your Primavera P6 is referred to as the directory bar. This left hand portion here is, we're going to be referring to it as the directory bar. Remember, this directory bar simply is this icons of the left hand portion of our Primavera P6. Now, if you also go to the right hand portion of your Primavera P6, you also notice some of the buttons there. Okay, good. So all the buttons of this right hand portion of your Primavera P6, we are going to be referring to it as the command bar, or better still, it is known as the command bar. Of course, the reason why it's called command bar is this is where we send command to either projects or activities that you have in your Primavera P6. Then you will also notice at the top here, at the very top, there are also some other buttons that are also displayed at the top of your Primavera P6. So these buttons that we have here, we are going to be referring to all of these components of our Primavera P6 as the tools bar. So the top here represents the tools bar. Then don't forget, you have your tabs or your menu, which will include things like file, edit, view, enterprise, and then tools, and then also admin, and then help. So we're going to refer to this as our menu. So notice that in the menu you have the file, the edit, the view, the enterprise, the tools, the admin, as well as the help. Remember earlier on I told you that we have three major views, which was the first part I mentioned, which is the view 1, the view 2, as well as the 3. So remember we said the view 1 represents our, timeline view. And the view 2 represents our Gantt view. And the third one now represents our detail view. Alright, awesome. So in this detail view, notice that we also have specific tabs in the detail view. Well, yours might not be displaying all the tabs that I currently have. Don't forget that we are actually at liberty to choose which tabs to display and which ones not to display. So each of these elements, or each of these portion of our detail view, each of these buttons that you have in the detail view put together, we'll refer to them as tabs. So in essence, we are going to be referring to all of these that you have in the detail view as what we refer to as tabs. Then also, if we go to our timeline view, which is our view number 1, you will notice that you have what we now refer to as columns. Each of these lines that you have here is what we now refer to as columns. So for example, you have your project ID column. Remember, we're still in our project view. Have your project ID column, then you have your project name column, you have your total activities column, you also have strategic priority column. Depending on also what you want to display, we also are at liberty to display specific columns, and we're going to learn how to do that much more later. This is quite necessary because in the course of our training, to enable us to navigate, we're going to be using words like go to the directory bar. So if I say go to the directory bar and click on resources, so you just know that you're going to go to the bar by the left and click on resources. Or I say go to the command bar and click on add. So you simply know that you're going to the command bar and you're going to be clicking on the add button. Or I say go to the detail view and click on the general tab. So you know that you're coming to this third view and then you're clicking on the general tab, which of course we have here. Or I say, let us go to the enterprise menu. So you know that you're simply going to come to the enterprise menu. Or I could also say, go to the tools bar and click on filter. So you just know that you need to go to the tools bar and then you click on the filter button. So that's essentially why this description is important, for us to be able to understand what we are seeing in our Primavera P6 and then also be able to determine what each of it represents, and then so you'll be able to use it. Okay, so another very important thing you may notice in the Primavera P6 is that from the project view, you may also notice that you have a whole lot of items there. First of all, let's talk about what each of the items here in our timeline view represent. Notice that we have specific icons that look like a pyramid or a golden pyramid as it were. So these icons here that look like pyramid, those are what we refer to as our EPS. So remember we said these icons represent our EPS. So if we click on each of them, we can actually collapse it. So you can see I am collapsing all of my EPS that I have by default in Primavera P6. So you can see by default I have a couple of EPS. I have energy and construction EPS, I have energy services EPS, I have manufacturing EPS, I have product development EPS, I have corporate programs EPS, and then I also have IT, information technology EPS. So of course I can also choose to expand them. So when you expand, you notice that there are some icons here that now look like folders. That's essentially what we're seeing here. This looks like a folder, this looks like a folder, and all of these elements that look like folder, each of them represents a project. So in essence, under my engineering and construction EPS, what I have here is I have about how many projects? I have about 6 projects under the engineering and construction EPS. And then under energy services EPS, I also have about 6 other projects. And then in manufacturing EPS, I also have about 6 projects. And don't forget, in product development EPS, one very exciting thing you may notice here in the product development EPS is that we have another EPS under this very EPS. So the second level of the EPS is what we now refer to as our EPS node. So in essence, you can actually have an EPS underneath an EPS. If you've been following our discussion earlier on, remember we started by talking about the fact that EPS is synonymous to what we refer to as program in project management. And how we define program, we said that program is simply a group of related projects. So what you have here under each of these EPS is simply a group of related projects. And what has been clearly illustrated here so far is that even under an EPS, you can also have sub EPS. So you can actually have, let's say, under an EPS, you also have another EPS, which is still under EPS, which is still under the overarching EPS. So if, for example, the set of projects is such that we cannot, we have varying parts or various parts of it, so you can further break them down into different other programs. So that's essentially what you're seeing here, and that's why you're seeing program 1 and then also program 2. And each of these programs has projects that you have within them, just like we have in this case. You now have different projects within each of these programs, as well as program 2, where we also have different projects within each of these programs. Once we have been able to have a hold on that, you also notice that we have other EPSs that you have in your Primavera P6. So that's essentially what this portion represents. Then beyond that as well, if you take a look, remember we're still in the project view. So if you take a look at these projects that you have in the project view, we can decide to open a particular project so that it will now take us from our project view to what we refer to as the activities view. So select any project or any of the sample projects that you have in your Primavera P6. In my own case, the city center office building project. So you can simply right click on it. So, and then click on open project. So once you do that, Primavera would open the project for you. So what we are seeing now is the project, which is the city center office building. Don't forget, you can always expand your columns to display certain things a lot more conspicuously, just in case you've not they're not clearly displayed. So where we are now is the activities view. So you can conspicuously see it here that we're now in the activities view, And like I mentioned earlier on, whatever view you are will be conspicuously displayed at the very top of your P6, which is essentially what we're seeing here. So you can see activities displaying here. So don't forget that this activities window that is open, I can also navigate back to my project view simply by clicking on project, and it will take me back to where we're coming from. You remember, this was from where we opened this very project by right clicking on it and then clicking on open project, and then it now brought us to the activities view, which is where we are at the moment. So if you take a look at the activities view as well, you will notice that it has a similar view to what we saw in the project view. But then what we saw in the project view is simply our EPSs and then also project. That's essentially what we're displaying in the project view. But if we now go to the activities view, you will notice that our activities view is now displaying the project that we have opened, and then also what we refer to as the summary task or the work packages, or basically our WBS, that is work breakdown structure elements. We're still going to talk about this much more later, how to create a work breakdown structure and some other details. And then also notice that within each of your work packages or your WBS elements, you now have what we call the activities. So activities are these items that you have in your WBS. So you can see activities are represented using an icon that looks like a tablet. And then of course your WBS elements are represented using things that look like small boxes, as it were. So be mindful of the fact that I've already done some tweaking in my own project, which is the city center office building project. So it may not exactly appear the same as the one you have, but be that as it may, what we're simply doing at this moment, we're not creating anything yet. We're simply trying to understand the interface of the Primavera P6 so you can better appreciate it and then also be able to know essentially what each item there represents. So remember, I made mention of the fact that these icons that are highlighted and looks like two squares, those are what we refer to as our work packages. And then of course these ones that now look like tablets represent what we refer to as activities. So you will notice also that if we go to our Gantt, that the work packages usually have something like a dark line, and the size is way smaller than what you have for the activities, than the bars you have for the activities. So these are the activity bars. So you can see the activities bars look like rectangular boxes, and then these rectangular boxes that you're seeing represent the activity bars. And some of the activities bars come in different colors. For example, mine here is showing blue. So depending on the layout that you are, the colors will actually indicate something or mean something in your Primavera P6. So these ones that are showing blue simply represent activities that have been completed. So that's essentially why they are showing blue in color. And like I told you, I did some tweaking to illustrate this. All right, we're going to learn how to complete our activities much more later. While the ones that are still green in colors represent activities that are yet to start. And these bars that are dark or rather black in color and looks way slimmer, they represent your WBS elements. In other words, your summary task. And that's essentially what you're seeing here. Also notice that some of the icons look like stones. So these icons that look like stones represent what we call the milestone in project. So there's a milestone here, there's also another milestone at this point, and then there's another milestone at this point. So these are some of the different milestones that we have in this very sample project, and we're going to also be looking at how to create all of this much more later in our own P6. And then don't forget, there's also another milestone here. Then aside from that too, we have things that look like connecting arrows in the Gantt. So these connecting arrows are used to show relationship that exists between your project activities. And that's what these connecting arrows clearly describe. So it shows you that this is a finish to start relationship, finish to start relationship, Then we have, I think this should be a start-to-start relationship between these two activities. So the connecting arrows can actually be displayed, or you can choose not to display them. So if I don't want to display them, I simply go to my tools bar and click on relationship lines. So you can see the relationship lines here. So watch what happens to the connecting arrows you have in the Gantt once I click on the relationship lines. So when I click on it, you can see it disappears. So just in case your relationship lines are not showing, or the connecting arrows are not showing, simply come to your tools bar and then click on the relationship lines, and then it would display them. Then you will also notice that I have a particular line here which is red in color. This is what we refer to as our progress line. So your progress line is used to be able to determine how well you're progressing on a particular project. I can choose to display the progress line. I can also choose to remove the progress line. So you can see that's essentially what's happening now. So if I click on progress line, it disappears. And then if I want to display it again, I click on it and then it appears. Then just, on that particular project line, you're also going to see a particular line that is blue in color. That line now represents what we refer to as our status. In other words, this is our status line. So the status line helps us to determine essentially where we are at the moment with respect to the project. And like I mentioned earlier on, we're going to see how all of this play out much more later. Okay, now let's talk about the icons that we have in our directory bar. So if you take a look, if I hover my mouse on any of those icons, Primavera gives me a description of what each of these icons represent. So notice that in my directory bar, I have a couple of icons there that represent specific things that I'm going to be using in the Primavera P6. But first, talking about directory, what does directory mean? Directory simply talks about pages. So it helps us to navigate from one page to the other. So from the directory bar, I can create a new project. That's essentially what the new button there represents. Or I can open existing project. So for example, if I click on this open, don't forget you can also use a shortcut which is Control O. So if I click on this open in the directory bar, it takes me to open a project window. So from this window, first of all, you're going to see select a portfolio. Remember we talked about portfolio before. So by default, you see all projects as the portfolio. Then here you notice this view was similar to what we saw in the project view. So you will see your EPS and then you will see projects there. So another way I can open project other than opening it from the project view is simply to go to my directory bar and click on open, and then I would see the open project window. Then from there I select any particular project that I want to open, which in this case is the city center office building, and then I now click on the open button and it will eventually open the project for me. So for you to also understand some of the things you're seeing here, remember earlier on I told you that this represents projects that you have in your Primavera P6, and this represents the EPS. And that's what you're looking at as this pyramid. However, if you notice my city center office building project, the folder here looks open, but these other folders look closed. So it's simply telling me that this particular project is currently open in my Primavera P6, and that's why you're seeing it here as an open folder. So even if I click on open again, it will still bring me back to this window because that's the currently open project. So remember, we can decide to open a project either from the project view by right clicking on a particular project and then clicking on open project. We can also do same simply by going to the directory bar and click on the open button and then select whatever project that we want to and then click on open. So the next icon you're probably going to see there would also be close all. So if I want to close all the open projects that I have in my Primavera P6, all I simply need to do is I click on close all, and Primavera will ask me, are you sure you want to close this project? So if I click on yes, it will close all open projects. So if you look now, there is no folder that is currently open here any longer. And then don't forget, I can choose to open my projects again. It brings you back to the project view. So I can choose to open any project here once again. All I simply need to do is I right click on that very project, and then I click on open project. Or if you don't want to follow that path, you can simply go to your directory. You can simply go to your directory bar, click on open, and then select the project that you want to open, and then click on open. Don't forget, you can simply do Ctrl-O if that's also what you prefer. So it opens the project and then brings me back to the activities view. Then you will also notice that we have what we refer to as a project icon here. So the project icon will also help me to navigate back to my project view. So remember, this project view that you saw here, when I clicked on this project icon, it simply brought me back to this view. That's what this project icon does. Then if I want to see my resources for a particular project, that's essentially what the resources icon in the directory bar does. So if I click on resources, notice that it opens another resource page for me and shows me all the current resources that I have in the project. Don't forget, these resources, some of them come by default, on Primavera P6, and we're going to be learning how to create our resources. So far we have about 3 pages open. You have your project, you have your resources, and then you also have your activities. Then directly below your resource view, we have the report. So if I click on report, it takes me to the report page. So I've opened another page. Remember, we said directory bar helps us to navigate in our pieces from one page to the other. So you can see my reports page. So I can choose whatever report I want to come up with in the current project that is currently open. So Primavera gives you myriads of options about which report you want to produce at every point in time. So for example, I want to see my WBS summary, and I can right click on it and then go to run reports. Then any other one you want to run or any other report you want to do, this is essentially a page that will help you to come up with your report. Then aside from that, there's also the tracking. Tracking is also another very important part of your P6. So if we click on it, it takes us straight to the tracking window. So this probably is taking some time to load. Okay, so good. So this is my tracking window. And the essence of your tracking is to enable you understand the status of your project or where you are at the moment with respect to your project. And then also it gives you a key explaining essentially what each of these items or what each of these elements in your Primavera P6 represent. So this is one key thing that tracking eventually helps you to do. And we're going to be looking at how to track each item that we have in our Primavera P6 much more later. Now, aside from the tracking, if I also come below, you will notice that I have activities tab here. So if I click on the activities tab, it opens the activities window for me. So remember, this was a window we had before, so it didn't need to open a fresh one because activities window had already been open, and that's why it's bringing us back to the activities window. Then directly below the activities, you now have your WBS, which is your work breakdown structure. So if I click on the work breakdown structure, it takes me straight to the WBS page. So in my WBS page, I have my work breakdown structure displayed here. Don't forget that I can choose whatever view I want from the tools bar. My view is currently on chart view, and that's why my work breakdown structure is appearing like a hierarchical decomposition in form of a chart. I can decide to see it as a Gantt chart. So if I click on the Gantt chart icon in my tools bar, it displays my work breakdown structure, which is my WBS, as a Gantt together with the Gantt chart, which is what you're seeing here in the right hand side of the screen. Then I can also choose to make it tables alone. So when I make it table alone, there is no Gantt anymore. What I am seeing here is just table. Alright, so this is our WBS view. So let's leave it at the Gantt view. So notice our WBS view has been opened and we're currently looking at our work breakdown structure. Then we can also view other items like resource assignment. So resource assignment helps us to understand what is the load of work that a particular resource is going to be performing. In essence, it helps us understand how many days or time period that a resource person would be engaged in this very project. That's essentially what you're seeing here. And then also the specific dates that the resource person is going to be working, and how long the person is going to be working, how many hours, and all. So that's what the resource assignments clearly demonstrate. Then other items you can see here are our WPs and also documents. WP simply means work products. Work product simply includes things or documents. The work product and document simply talks about the documents you use in carrying out your work on project. For example, design. For example, regulations, policies, minutes of meetings. So all of these work products can actually be uploaded here in Primavera P6 so that you have all of it in one place. Then also we have our expenses. So if I click on expenses, it shows me various categories of expenses that you have. And then don't forget, you also have the risk icon here. So if I click on risk, it takes me to the risk page. And then with this, I can add risk to the project and be able to do detailed risk analysis in the project, and then also carry out specific qualitative and quantitative analysis to manage risk. So these are some of the default icons that you see in the directory bar of your P6. But another key thing you may notice is also we have certain icons here that appear very small, like arrows pointing leftwards. So that's what we refer to as the more buttons. So if I click on the more buttons, it gives me option to add or remove buttons. So if I click on add or remove buttons, it drops down, and then from here I can choose which buttons I also want to add in my directory view aside from the ones that are currently displayed. So for example, if I decide to add, let's say, the refresh data, so let me add the refresh data. So okay, good. So remember, as I just clicked on it, it just added the refresh data, and that's how to add buttons. So you can also choose here to add more buttons depending on what you want to add. So let's say, for example, I want to add my okay, well, fair enough. I like it the way it is, and then I can also add more buttons here. Good. So all of these are some of the things that we have in P6 that can enable us effectively manage our project in the course of our project implementation. So that's a description of some of the buttons or some of the elements that you have in your directory bar. So let's navigate back to our activities page. Don't forget that if you want to close any of these pages that you currently have open in your Primavera P6, you will notice that there is a close button here by the right hand side of your screen. This little one, please, this one that is red in color. So this represents close for whatever window that you currently have open. So I want to close my tracking, and then I want to close my reports window, my risk, my project expenses, my work products and documents, my resource assignments, and then I'm also closing my work breakdown structure. And the next one I want to close would be my resource page. So I just want my activities page and my project page displayed at the moment for the purpose of our illustration. So after we've discussed about each of these elements you have in your directory bar, another very important part of our P6 is the command bar. So remember I told you that the icons that we have displayed at the right hand side of your screen represents the command bar. So if you take a look at the command bar, you will notice that there are a couple of buttons there, or what I call command. So for example, you have the add button, Then you have the delete button. Obviously, you know what this means. For example, if I want to add a new element to any page at all, say we are at this page, which is the activities page, and I want to add a new activity, all I simply need to do is I click on the add button. So once you do that, it creates a new activity portion for you and then brings up the activity. It brings up a wizard for you, which is a new activity wizard. Don't forget, if you don't want to use the wizard, you can simply check do not show this wizard again. So we're not going to be adding a new activity, so let's click on cancel. So it removes the activity for us. Also, if you want to delete an activity or you want to delete a particular element in any page at all that you currently have open, all you simply need to do is you click on the delete button. So if I click on delete, it asks me, are you sure you want to delete the selected activity, which is this activity? So because I don't want to delete it, I click on no. Then there's also the cut button. Of course, cut simply means if you want to cut a particular item and maybe paste it somewhere else, that's what the cut does for you. Then there is the copy icon as well, which of course is used to copy elements that you have within your timeline. Then aside from that, we have the resources icon here. So if I click on the resources icon here, what it does for me is that it helps me to assign resources to my project activities. And then we're going to still talk about how to assign resources much more later. Then aside from assigning resources, I can also assign resources by roles. So once I click on it, it will say that the selected activity does not have any roles assigned. So in essence, if we had roles assigned to this very activity, if you click on resources by roles, it will show you the roles that you have for that activity. Then you also notice that you have roles here. So if you click on roles, it will show you the different roles that you have currently in your P6. And then from here we can assign roles. So you can see this is assign roles portion. And then not just for assigning roles, we can also assign activity codes from here. So I can click on here and then assign activity codes to each of these activities. So you can see our activity codes. So we can choose to assign codes to our activities from this very page. Now, aside from that, we can also assign predecessors. So if I click on predecessor, you can see assign predecessors window pops up. And then I can expand this window. Okay, so it's a lot more conspicuous. So this will enable me assign relationships or create relationships just like we rightly have here. Then I can also use the assign successor window. So this is the assign successor window, which I can also use to create relationships. Then beyond that also, I have what we now refer to as steps. So I can assign activity step templates to clearly illustrate the steps that will be taken in performing a particular activity, and that's essentially what this helps us to do. So if you notice the command bar, most of the items what we have in the command bar is giving instruction to our PC. For example, add, delete, copy, cut, then assign roles, assign resources, assign predecessors, assign successors. So that's why it's called a command bar, because that's where we send instruction from to elements that you have in your P6. Don't forget, you can also add or remove buttons. That's what these add buttons portion shows us, depending on which other button you may want to add in your command bar. Then also in our tools bar, you will also notice that there are specific icons there in the tools bar. So if we take a look at each of those icons, you have the print icon. Obviously, if you want to print our work, that's what this does for us. You can also set up your print, or you can also go to print preview to look at, if you print, what it would look like. So for example, if we click on the print preview, if I decide to print my work now, this is exactly what it's going to look like. But this is not what this is basically, well, it looks okay, but it still doesn't capture some detail that I want it to capture. And we're going to learn how to be able to do that much more later. All right, so I close this. And then also you can also decide to see only the tables view of the activities you have in your PC. So for example, if I click on table, it removes the Gantt, and then you can see the only thing I have here is my table. So this is necessary, especially if you just want to focus on specific items in your P6. Say you just want to see the table and you don't want to see the Gantt view. Now, aside from that, I can also display my Gantt chart. So if I click on the Gantt chart, it displays my Gantt chart as well. Then I can also decide to view my activity network. So the activity network is basically your network diagram. So it clearly illustrates the relationship that exists between your activities for any given work package. So you can see for this work package, these are the activities I have in it, and these are the relationships that exist in it. And for this work package, and then for this work package, so you can see my network diagram for each of these activities. All right, good. So remember earlier on, let's go back to the Gantt view. Remember earlier on I showed you what the relationship lines do. They help us to show these relationship lines. So I can choose to display them. I can also choose not to display them. That's what the relationship lines do for us. Then I can also choose to see the chart view, but unfortunately I may not be able to see my chart view for activities because assuming we're in the WBS window. So remember when we went back, let's go back to the WBS. You can see the chart view becomes highlighted, so I can click on chart view and then see my work breakdown structure as a chart. So let's go back to activities. All right, so now don't forget you have the add more buttons icon, so you can choose to add more buttons. Aside from that, we also have what we call details. Notice that we have a detail view, which is the third portion of your P6 that I made mention earlier on. So these details would help to display the detail view. So let's say for example we don't want this detail view anymore. So let me remove the detail. I go to view and then I go to show on bottom, and then I select no bottom layout. So look now that I've removed my detail view. So now that I've removed my detail view, if I want to display my detail view, I simply come to the tools bar and then I click on detail. So you can see once I click on detail, it displays my detail view once again. Then we also have the activity usage spreadsheet. What the activity usage spreadsheet does, it shows us essentially the activity usage of our Primavera P6, and then this activity usage, which we're still going to be discussing much more later, can help us to be able to determine what's the level of usage for each activity that you have in your P6. For example, it shows you a detailed breakdown for each element that you have. In this case, if we take a look at specific elements that you have in our P6, so you can see for each of these activities, it gives you a description of what the planned value is, that's the planned total, then what the remaining is, and then also what the actual is, that's the amount of money that has been spent so far. That's essentially what you're seeing for each of these activities: the planned, the remaining, the actual, the planned, the remaining, the actual for each of them. Then I also have the activity usage profile. So one key thing that the activity usage profile does for us is that it helps us to show our S-curve, and then also helps us to do some analysis to be able to determine the level of usage of project activities, and then also some other details that we may want to understand. Then aside from that also, and then of course next we talk about the resource usage spreadsheet, which of course gives us a description or a breakdown of what resources are currently assigned to our Primavera P6. Then beyond that, there is also the resource usage profile. So the resource usage profile will help us to be able to determine the budgeted units, actual units, then also remaining early units, as well as overallocated early units, and then also limits for each resource person that you have in your project. That's what this helps us to do. And then beyond that also, don't forget, there is the trace logic. The trace logic essentially helps us to determine the relationship that exists between activities that you have within any given work package in your work breakdown structure. So don't forget, this is essentially what the trace logic helps us to do. Then beyond that also, we have the bars. So if I click on the bars, one key thing the bars help me do is that it helps me to customize my bars. So you can see I can choose what to display and then also what not to display in my bars, and that's what the bars helps us to do. Then also we have the columns. If I click on the columns window pops up. So notice that what I currently have displayed in my timeline is what you have in this side of my column screen. So you can see I have the activity ID column, I have the activity name, I have the original duration column, I have the remaining duration column, I have the start, and then I have the finish, and then the float. If I expand this, okay, let me expand this so you can have a better view of what I am talking about. So let me expand this. Okay, good. So I go back to columns. So understand that what I have here are essentially the columns that are currently displayed in my timeline. So from activity ID to activity name to original duration to remaining duration to start, then I also have finish, and then I have total float. So these are the columns that are currently displayed. So just in case I want to remove any of these columns, all I simply need to do is anyone I want to remove. So for example, I want to remove the total float from being displayed in my timeline. I simply click on total float here, and then I click on remove from list. So if I click on remove from list, it removes the total float. So watch what happens now. When I click on apply, you notice that total float column disappears. So if I want to add it back, I select total float from here and I click on this very button, which will now add it to the list, so you can see total float. And then this arrow here that points up and down helps me to position each of these columns depending on exactly where I want it to be. So if I want my total float, for example, to be after my activity ID, remember what we currently have is activity name after activity ID, but I want my total float to appear. So I select total float and then I click on apply. So you can see total float now shows up after activity ID. Also, I can choose to add any other column here. Say for example, let's add a particular cost column. Say for example, I want to add my actual labor cost. So I select actual labor cost and then I click on add to list. So it adds my actual labor cost, and I want my actual labor cost to be after the original duration. So I bring it down to after original duration, and then I click on apply. So it shows up, and I'm sure this is where I want it to be. And then when I click on OK, it just stays. So you can see the, you can see the editing that we have just done. All right, good. So that's what the columns button does for us. Then also you have your time scale. So the time scale essentially helps us to be able to determine how our Gantt would appear. So you can see my Gantt is appearing quarter and then also on a monthly basis. So what I currently have displayed is 2 lines. That's why you're seeing 2 lines here. You can see this is the first line and then this is the second line. If I wanted to display 3 lines, I can check the 3 lines portion, and if I click on apply, for example, you can see it displays 3 lines, displays the year, the quarter, and then the month. But beyond this also, I can also determine exactly what I want to see on each of those lines, whether I want to see it on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, or on an annual basis. So I can choose, under the date interval, I can choose drop down. I can choose month/week, and then I click on apply. So you remember, once I just did that, what I'm now saying is year, month, and then week. So I can even decide to make it a lot more granular. I can even decide week/day, and then when I click on apply, so you can see it's now showing me daily. It's now showing me days, and then month as well as year. But I'll prefer to have it as so that our Gantt doesn't look unnecessarily too stretched or too long. So let me still leave it at month/week. So I click on apply and then I now click on OK. Now we also have what we refer to as the filter by. So filter by helps you to display exactly the activities that you want to see. That's what filter by does. So if I want to see only completed activities, if I check this and then I click on apply, so you notice the only activities that will display in my P6 timeline would be the activities that work has already been completed on, and that's what the filter button helps us to do. But then we do not want to do any filter right now, so I just uncheck and I click on cancel. Okay, so this doesn't disappear. I go back, I uncheck, and then I click on apply and I click on OK. So all my activities are back again. Then I can also group and sort by. So the essence of the group and sort by is to enable us to group our activities depending on exactly what we choose to see. And also there are also other icons here like your line numbers. If I want to display my line numbers, I click on it, so you can see it displays the line numbers for the activities. Then also I have the visualizer. The visualizer is another Oracle solution that can integrate with Primavera P6. Then another very important icon here that we're going to be using is the schedule icon, because the schedule button would help us when we're going to look at this when we begin to update our status. That's what the schedule button does for us. Then don't forget, you can also level your resources using this very button. Then also notice that you have the progress spotlight. Progress spotlight, when you turn it on, will help you to spotlight the activities that need to be updated at specific intervals. Let's see our progress spotlight. I just turned it on. Okay, yes, so this is our progress spotlight. So it helps you to spotlight the activities that you need to update so that you can have a better understanding of what activities that needs to be updated at every point in time. And that's one major thing that the progress spotlight helps us to do. Then don't forget, I also talked about the progress line, which shows us which is used to make an analysis as to where we are in the project. Then of course we also have update progress. If we start executing, this is when update progress becomes necessary. Then also disable auto reorganization, which will help us to disable reorganization of activities, just in case you're zoom in and zoom out. And then also best fit will basically give you a best view in your P6. Then also we have what we call new horizontal table tab group. So if I click on new horizontal tab group, okay, so if I want to display multiple windows at the same time, just like you're currently seeing, I can simply click on this new horizontal tab group. So this will help me. You can see now I can see my work breakdown structure together with my activities view and the Gantt all at the same time. I can also choose to display them in a vertical format. So if I do that, you can see my work breakdown structure, my activities, my detail view, all displayed here. So that's one key thing this helps us to do. Don't forget that I can decide to add more windows. Say for example, I add my resource windows here, and if you notice, I'm now seeing my resource window and then also my activities window, and then I'm looking at my details view at this point. I can also choose to see them from a horizontal perspective. So this basically helps you to display multiple windows. So I can look at all my windows are almost at the same time, my resource window, my work breakdown structure, and then also my activities. And then don't forget, we also have the hint help. Okay, so if I want to merge all these tabs to come together the way they used to be, merge all tabs, yeah? So when I do that, so you can see it restores my window to what it used to look like before. Don't forget, we're on the activities. Finally, we have the hint help. If you click on the hint help, and you notice that anywhere you hover your mouse on, you're going to be looking at the hint here, and that's what the hint help does for you. So just in case you've forgotten what each of these elements simply represent, the hint help would help you to explain them in detail, and then you can always get help if you need them. So these are essentially the meaning and the function of each of these buttons that you have in your P6. And then of course the next lesson we're going to be looking at each of these menu, and then also what the buttons there in the menu represent. So these buttons that you have displayed either let me put off my hint help. These buttons you have displayed either in your command, in your directory bar, in your command bar, on your detail view. Those are the buttons that we also have even in our menu. So essentially what Oracle or Primavera P6 has done is that most of these buttons that you have in your menu was spread around so that to a large extent you can, you know, have them like one click away instead of having to go to the menu and then selecting and all of that. But then don't forget, there are also some other icons or some other items in the menu that may not be displayed, and you are at liberty to display them at every point in time. So this essentially helps us to understand and be able to navigate in our Primavera P6. And then also, if I want to return my detail view to the default view, I simply go to view, and then I go to show on bottom, I select details. It takes me back to the detail view which I have earlier on. So this is a quick tour of the Primavera P6 interface to enable us to understand essentially each of these icons and then what each of these items represent, so that when we begin to use it much more later, it will be a lot more easier for you to understand and then appreciate. Okay, so I hope this particular lesson has been quite informative for you.
So in the next set of lessons, we're now going to learn how to start creating in our P6. I really can't wait, so that we'll begin to create a project and EPS and OBS, then work breakdown structure and some other very key elements of the Primavera P6.